Welcome to the future, explore the future of virtual reality with Oculus. We're excited to be here at South by Southwest 2015 with you guys. This is our annual Oculus Ask Us Anything panel. We try to just take comments from you guys. We've taken a huge number of questions from the internet and Twitter that we're going to be going through during this panel. I want to start with just some introductions while we kick things off. My name is Nate Mitchell. I'm a VP of Product at Oculus, and we're just going to go right down the line.
My name is Palmer, and I am the founder of Oculus.
My name is Ryan. I'm the electrical lead at Oculus.
My name is Paul Betner. I'm the founder and CEO at Playful, creator of Luckey's Tale.
Yeah, I should say this is Oculus and Friends. Paul was kind enough to join us. Thank you, Paul. So I wanted to kick things off by just going down the line and everyone sort of giving their take on what they're most excited for in the year ahead when it comes to VR. Palmer, do you want to start?
I'm excited to see a lot of the content that people have been working on for the past year that's kind of been under wraps, go public, for them to finally start telling people about what they're working on.
I'm excited for the GPU vendors to really target VR and kind of get that next level of technology that we need to support a lot of the next generation experiences. So all the things that are coming out from our favorite GPU vendors are pretty exciting.
I'm most excited for people to finally play our game. We've been working on it for a couple of years, and I just can't wait for people to see it. We showed it, shows like this, but can't wait for the public to play it.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to start with questions. The top-rated questions from the community, especially the Oculus subreddit. Then I am going to interlace a number of questions from you guys in the audience. We are going to have some mics that are going around the room, but just bear with us. We'll sort of we've got some attendants. Raise your hand. We'll send attendants your way. If I call on you, you can ask your question. But we'll also be running through our list of key stuff that the community wants to get answered. So, to kick it off, the number one question of all time in the history of Oculus. Palmer, when can we expect the consumer Rift?
Why would you ask me that, Nate? You know. We don't have anything to announce. I'll just get that out of the way. Now is not the time or the place, but everything's going well.
So to follow that up, which I thought this was a nice pairing, there's a quote from one of the subreddit questions, and it was, quote, Palmer said that the consumer Rift would be the best VR headset at any price point. He also said something would have to go terribly wrong for the consumer Rift to not be released by the end of 2015. Does he still stand by those statements?
I will divide this into the two questions that it is. The first one is whether the Rift will be the best VR headset at any price. I still do believe that. I still stand by it. I'm pretty confident it will be, but that could change. I'd love for it to change because it means there's something even better out there, but I think that's unlikely right now. The second question, whether something, if it doesn't come out by the end of 2015, has something gone horribly wrong, I'd say that I did say that before we made a lot of changes to our roadmap, and we've expanded a lot of the ambition that we had around the product and what we wanted to do. Us partnering with Facebook allowed us to do a lot of things that we just wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, like hire 300 people to be working on getting the Rift out as quickly as possible to the quality level that we wanted to get it out to. So I can't comment on the date one way or another in either direction, but I can say that nothing is going horribly wrong. Everything is going horribly right.
All right, so when will Gear VR get positional tracking? That was one of the top questions. For those of you guys that don't know, Oculus has two products. One is the Oculus Rift, which is our PC sort of high-fidelity VR headset. And then we've partnered with Samsung to bring the Gear VR Innovator Edition, which is powered by your cell phone, actually, a Note 4 or a Galaxy S6. And the focus there is really portability and accessibility. So, the question here is, when does Gear VR get positional tracking, which is one of the core features that we have on the Rift?
I'll take that one, Nate. So just recently at GDC, some of you probably saw John Carmack announced, very awesome, we're going to ship the consumer Gear VR later this year, and that's something we're all really excited about. How many of you guys have tried Gear VR? It's available. Oh my gosh, awesome. Wow, that's a lot of people. So you guys know it's an awesome experience, and we're really excited to ship more of them later this year. One of the things Carmack also mentioned is positional tracking is something that's hard with Gear VR, and you have to mate that with the core fundamental need to be portable and accessible. That's the whole point of that product, is to get more people exposed to how awesome VR is. So it's a problem we're working on. It's a hard problem to do without compromising portability and accessibility, but we don't have anything to announce at this time.
Fair enough. Why don't we take a question from the audience? Where's our first microphone victim? Who's close to
I can't see anything.
You got one over there? Do you have someone with a question over there? Some guy running toward the... Okay, we'll get this guy right here in the front. We've got lots more hard questions queued up, guys, so...
Hey, thanks so much for making yourself available to all of us. You guys are definitely an object of a lot of interest right now, and as somebody who's watched VR have a few waves of interest over the years, really excited for Oculus. My question is, societally, when you look at fully immersive VR the way the Rift does it, and then you look at hybrids like what Microsoft is attempting to do with the HoloLens, do you think that naturally divides the usage of the two experiences, one being fully immersive and you can't see people coming up on you or you can't walk around with it, and the other would be, augmented? Can you talk a little bit about your vision for that?
I do think that it's going to lead to two very different use cases, but as the technology converges and good augmented reality devices become very similar to good virtual reality devices, we're probably going to see those use cases converge, where you have people seamlessly transitioning between virtual spaces and real spaces, blocking things out and letting things into virtual spaces. But it's really hard to predict exactly where it's going to go. Me, personally, I'm much more excited about escaping from this reality into, more fantastic places than I am placing new objects into the real world. It could be that augmented reality is just as big, if not bigger, as virtual reality in the long run. But as a gamer, I'm a lot more excited about virtual reality, largely because we know we can make good games and good media for it. We know that we can make things that you go in and you have this incredible experience with other people or on your own. That is less proven for augmented reality. Nobody has ever proven a killer application for virtual reality or augmented reality. And most proposed AR killer apps are, it's not that they're not cool, they're just kind of boring. It's things like, assisting you with how to use a tool, or telling you where you're walking, or where to find the best restaurant nearby. I'm not excited by those things as much.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I echo Palmer's sentiments. I think when you especially think about sort of our dedication to games, we see VR really being an awesome next generation gaming platform, absolutely. And that is, like Palmer's saying, sort of a more obvious direction to head than AR, which has a lot of challenges unsolved. Could be awesome for games, but VR stepping inside the game and actually being there, super attractive to me. Why don't we take a question from this side, if there's one over here. There's a microphone, there's a person. Let's do that.
So when Facebook acquired you...
Oh.
So, better? So when Facebook acquired you, Mark Zuckerberg made a point of saying for him it's really about much more than about gaming. He wants virtual reality to be some kind of operating system and have many more applications. Do you agree with him, or is for you gaming still the killer application, or the most important one?
So it's important to note, he didn't say necessarily that it's going to be an operating system. He said it's going to be a computing platform. And there is a difference. Windows is an operating system. Personal computers are a computing platform. And I'd say the same thing for mobile devices, whereas iOS is an operating system. And that's not to say that Oculus is going to be the only one. There's going to be a lot of people in the virtual reality space. And I think that it is true that virtual reality is going to go far beyond games. If you look at science fiction that incorporates virtual reality, it's most often not about using VR for games. It's about, parallel worlds that exist alongside or instead of the real one. It's about doing communication and work inside of virtual spaces, not just about gaming. One of the reasons we're so focused on gaming, besides being gamers today, is that all of the tools and talent to create real-time immersive 3D environments with high fidelity, it is the games industry. It's game tools, it's game engines, and it's game programmers. Even as virtual reality expands to things like architecture and social tools and sports or whatever, it's going to be the games industry that drives that. And in a way, it's not that virtual reality is going to expand to other things as much as the games industry is going to start encompassing a lot more different kinds of content. So you will see other things, but right now, today, and probably for the next few years, it's going to be very gaming focused, just because that's where it all is right now.
Cool. All right, we're going to get back to this list of hard questions here. So one of the top questions from the community was, have you guys nailed input? And I think the main question here is around VR input, tracked controllers, hand tracking. What is it? What does it look like? When is it coming? Palmer, you're the input guy up here.
Yeah, I am the input guy at Oculus. I've been a major proponent for like 6 degree of freedom, high precision hand tracking. But I don't think anyone has nailed input. I think that what we're seeing, whether it's in the VR space or outside the VR space, they're the very first steps towards the kinds of input that we're going to see that work in virtual reality. And I'm not talking on a scale of, eventually we want to have neural implants and perfect haptics. I'm talking about even in the near term, things like just doing basic finger tracking or having basic haptic interactions. What we have and everything else that I've seen up to this date, it's not even close to what could be done. I'm really excited about what we're doing, but I think we kind of need to think of it like we did the first Nintendo Wii or DS games or the first mobile games that came out. It took time for people to figure out how to use these new systems to make really compelling games. It didn't happen overnight, and a lot of the first things that came out, they were interesting. They held your interest for a little bit, but it's a lot harder to make a real long-term compelling experience out of it. And we've talked to a lot of developers, this goes both ways. It's not only challenging to make input, it's challenging to make games for novel input. We have a lot of developers coming to us and saying, developing for things like Leap Motion or Kinect or Razer Hydra, it's really hard. There's all kinds of challenges that we're not familiar with.
Yeah, there's nothing more fundamental to a game's design than input. I mean, we've been working in this space in VR now for a couple of years, and it's still probably the biggest unanswered question, which is I'm sure why it got upvoted there, is because as far as when you think about interacting with any kind of content, we certainly have experiences like the stuff you guys are doing with Story Studio, where it's entirely just about the HMD. And even in those cases where it's presented as a film-like experience, it still feels interactive just because of the fact that you can look around. So, we shouldn't overlook the fact that the HMD itself is a form of input controller, high fidelity, and very useful for certain types of experiences. But yeah, I can't wait to figure out. I mean, the first thing almost anyone does in VR when they first put it on is, wait,
where's my hands?
Yeah, exactly.
And we are really trying to solve that and a bunch of other input challenges, but again, I don't think that anyone has nailed it, and it's going to be quite some time before people have nailed it. But we're going to try to get out what we think is exciting as fast as we can.
Palmer, do you think that games where I think nail it means the input disappears and you're immersed in the experience, games where the input is like you're driving a car or you're flying a spaceship, do you think it's been nailed in that scenario?
Nobody's nailed that either, and that's kind of related, is that making a universal virtual reality input device is very hard. It's one thing to say, let's make an abstract input like a gamepad work for racing and driving and shooting and walking on a console where you're playing on a flat screen. In virtual reality, you can still do all of those things, but you end up with the best driving controller. It's definitely a racing wheel now. The best flight controller is a flight stick. It's really tough to make a universal abstract virtual reality input device that nails any particular game. It's always going to be a set of compromises, at least right now.
Paul, do you want to, one of the top questions was, for you, Paul, what are your top 2 to 3 tips for developers getting into VR for the first time? You talked about input being like, probably the core fundamental challenge right now. Do you have other challenges or suggestions for people who are diving into VR and just getting started?
I think that, alongside the input kind of topic, my number one tip would be for developers especially developers that are moving from existing platforms, whether it's mobile, Xbox, PC, whatever it is, to VR, is to be willing to put aside some of your expectations. And some of the things that you think in your head are going to be awesome. And a lot of those things are, but a lot of them counterintuitively don't work as well as you'd think they would. And I think, the clearest example of this is some of the very first experiments that a lot of us did with first-person games, something like Counter-Strike or Half-Life. And it immediately kind of hit us all in the face that, like, hey, actually the hardware is good enough, but the content is the problem now, because running around in hallways at 30 miles an hour is not comfortable. And it was kind of a shock for a number of us developers, because we had been, spent 20 years of our life dreaming what VR was going to be, and that was what was in our head. And so, like, to kind of run into that, and for me, what that's what that realization has been is that we need to, like, we've had the most success when we've been able to put aside some of that baggage, so to speak, those expectations, and really explore new things that are fun, and that's what I would suggest.
Cool.
Take it off, and they turn to us and they say, that's the best way that I've ever played a platformer before. And I think that's probably true for a number of genres that we haven't even explored yet. If you think about, just obviously we've seen that it works for any game where you're in a cockpit or driving, in the seat of a car or a spaceship or anything like that is so compelling in VR. We've now seen that, third-person character games amazing, and I think there's just, God games, RTSs, there's so much that we have yet to see. And VR isn't just a gimmick for these games. VR literally makes
VR. And I'm just curious, we've seen, from you three especially, we've seen a lot of content generated over the last 2.5 years. What do you guys think has been some of the best sort of genres?
I think first we can answer that question. It's been 2 years. VR is the holy grail of gaming. we've in the content that we've created and some of the stuff I've seen, anyone that I put inside one of those experiences, they just don't want.
We've recently seen companies pursue technical directions that are contrary to Oculus's opinions on their merits and trade-offs. Examples include Fresnel lenses, 2 screens versus 1, and seated versus standing. Have these products caused you to rethink your assumptions? So at Oculus, we're constantly challenging our assumptions, right? You can't build new technology and innovative new technology and you try to even imagine being the leaders in the space without constantly every day waking up and being like, are we doing the right thing? Is there a different direction that we should be looking at? Are we building the best product? And I thought actually those 3, there were a couple more that were listed, but those 3 were really interesting just as examples. So we debuted a feature prototype called Crescent Bay back at Oculus Connect last year. And for Crescent Bay, actually, if you look at those things, Fresnel lenses, standard versus seating, and 2 screens versus 1. So on Crescent Bay, we're actually using hybrid lens technology that incorporates Fresnel technology, which is something that initially when we shipped DK2, which is the second development kit for the Oculus Rift, we actually thought that lens design was the way to go. And if you look at Crescent Bay, it's evolved a lot, right, since then. So that was one where we actually went with something that was closer to Fresnel's. On seated versus standing, we've always developed and optimized the Rift to be both a seated and a standing experience, right? We thought that was super important. If you look at the last year of our demos and trying to demonstrate just how powerful that sense of presence can be, we have everyone standing up, right? Standing does tend to be this awesome amplifier for presence. I think we've always recommended to devs, look, if you're trying to build an awesome VR game, sitting down is probably the way to go. It's more people are going to just have the Rift at their computer. They're going to want to sit down for long-term gaming sessions, right? But ultimately, when we were talking about the hardware design early on, we made it a priority to make sure that standing experiences worked and they work well, because ultimately developers are going to be the ones that decide what sort of experiences they want to give to gamers, and gamers are going to be the ones that want to decide what they want to play. So we thought that was really important. And just one final one that actually isn't well known is that Crescent Bay is actually a 2-screen headset. That's news. I mean, that's been sort of rumored in the community for a long time.
It's been super obvious.
Well,
there are pictures that show it. People just haven't been analyzing them well enough.
We haven't announced that before. So that is another one where early on we thought 1 screen was the way to go, but ultimately we moved to a 2-screen system. Again, basically about a year ago, because we thought it had the right trade-offs for comfort and quality. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that we are constantly trying to push the boundaries of what's possible and what's out there, and re-evaluating our assumptions is the number one way to do that, to deliver the best product. So
I'd add on, we are wrong often. We might be right at some point in time, or we think we're right, but we often do change our minds, and often we change our minds before other people go out there and challenge us on stuff. We've got 300 people that are all working on this, and like Nate said, it's critical that we always be willing to be wrong and not stick to something that we've said is absolutely the way to do it if we're able to prove out something else.
Yep.
Speaking for the hardware team on that, I think we do tend to, all of the people who join our team have kind of a hacker background. We're founded by hackers. We've partnered with a company based on hacking, and it's demos win arguments, and we're always building different things. We have a very high bar these guys set, so it's a challenge, but it's something we really enjoy, and it's always about what's the best experience, what's the best VR. And Palmer, please don't challenge our photo analysts out there. They're pretty good.
They are pretty good.
I'm not challenging them, I'm berating them.
All right, so let's take a couple more questions from the audience. This guy was really quick right here. Can we get a mic to him?
So I think this relates to what you were saying earlier about the input problem. I'm a flight simmer, and I use a touchscreen in my gaming, and I'm really excited about Oculus, but the problem I have is that I'm not going to be able, my eyes are completely enclosed, and I'm not going to be able to see my peripherals. So I was curious, is there a way you guys could put like some kind of little removable strip under your eyes so that you could look down and see things like a mouse, joystick, touchscreen, stuff like that? So I know it's not a full VR experience, it's really just like an HMD with head tracking, but I think it helps you solve the problem that you're having with input, and just curious if that's something you guys would consider doing.
That would probably have to be a third-party modification. But I mean, the right way to do that would be not just to have, windows where you can glance down. It would be to have your cockpit line up with the actual rendered cockpit in the game. Ideally, so you could look down in it, like this, and you'd actually have the cockpit there, and you could look up, and it would, seamlessly transition between the two. Although the real good way to do it would be to have seamless hand and arm tracking and body tracking so that you can actually have your hands on a physical representation of the controls while looking at a virtual representation of the controls, potentially without having to spend so much effort on getting everything, perfectly authentic in the real world physical cockpit. You can see a little bit down in DK2, but not too much. I'll be honest, it hasn't been a priority for us, but it shouldn't be a very hard modification to do.
Yeah, when you look at our strategy with the Rift, my mic is falling down. When you look at our strategy with the Rift, we are more targeting that immersion, actually feeling like you're there. And like Palmer said, I think a more interesting approach is trying to bring your setup into the VR world. That starts to get really exciting, right? When you put your hand down, for example, on your throttle and a contextual menu pops up, that starts to get really interesting, and that's where I think VR is going to go.
And I also think that peripheral design is going to help with this, whether it's third-party additions or actual, products like throttles and sticks and hot-ass setups coming out that support it. It could be that there's peripherals that are made with virtual reality in mind that allow it to be used better. Like I said earlier, there is a trade-off between trying to make a universal abstract virtual reality system and something that's the absolute best for a particular use, like a driving simulator or a flight simulator. I gotta say, people with those specific setups do end up drawing, the short straw in a lot of ways with a system that's designed to try to do everything really well rather than try to work with a specific system perfectly.
Palmer, to your point earlier, you were talking about how in virtual reality it's really hard to create a universal controller because really ultimately what you want is the same thing you want in reality. You want controllers that suit the particular purpose. And I'm as a content creator, I'm very excited about what I see hopefully happening in the next couple of years where you have fairly low cost controllers that are tracked in the same environment that the rest of that their headset and everything else is tracked in. So when you pick up your guitar in Guitar Hero, you see your guitar, and it looks as amazing as you want it to look, and your friends multiplayer can see it and all that kind of stuff. And it seems to me that that's actually a very compelling way for us to create those experiences that are unique and kind of what you actually want in that environment.
I mean, that's true. Like I said before, making it a universal controller, I don't think anyone has any technology that can nail that, ever, until you're getting into the realm of, magical transforming controllers or, plugging directly into your nervous system. Yeah. We're going to be trying to nail input for every particular game for a long time.
We'll take another question. This gentleman right here. Sorry, back row. We're working our way back.
Okay, so today YouTube just announced support for 360 video, and I would love for when humanity finally lands on Mars for us to be watching a live stream of that happening. But that's a real event. So how focused is Story Studio in capturing real live events with 360 camera rigs, or are they going to leave that to companies like John?
So I can answer that. Story Studio is not necessarily focused on that. Their focus is really immersive cinema and storytelling, right? Trying to figure out not only how do you tell a story in VR, but how do you tell a great story in VR? And right now, that really does mean real-time CGI. So that the team, Edward, Max, Sashka, they're Pixar, ILM, EA folks, developers, and their sole focus is nailing real-time graphics and creating these really magical experiences. I don't know how many people in the audience have ever seen Lost. Anyone? No, that's a shame. Oh yeah, a couple people right here. Awesome. So we're going to be showing more of that over time. I think to your particular question, right now there's a lot of incredible teams working on trying to nail 360 capture, Jaunt, Next 3D, Felix and Paul, Verse. So we're right now leaving it more to them and trying to support them as best we can. And if you look at what we're doing on Gear VR with like Oculus 360 videos and things like that, trying to provide a standard player for people to play back those experiences, right? I would love to watch the Mars landing in Oculus 360. That'd be pretty awesome in the Rift. That's more of our focus today.
I would also, like you said, there's a lot of incredible teams that are working on 360 capture technology. There's also less incredible teams working on 360 capture technology. And like my last tweet was actually about this, how there's really a distinction between three-dimensional video and stereoscopic video, or at least there should be. There isn't right now. People equate them as the same thing. I think there is a big difference in relying on a hack like just taking 2 camera views and piping it back to your eyes, and actually doing it correctly. Understanding and mapping the environment and projecting video onto it. That's how you're going to make real virtual reality video. That's how you're going to make VR video that has position tracking, the ability to rotate your head without breaking your eyes. It's going to be a long road to get there. And we've done some R&D with it. There's a lot of other companies that are doing good R&D on it. But I do think that hopefully we'll be able to watch the Mars landing as a 3-dimensional video and not a 360-degree or just stereoscopic video. And also, this is a distinction really just for VR. For many other things like televisions or portable devices, it just doesn't matter. VR is really one of the very few technologies where there has to be a distinction between those two types of things.
There's a gentleman down there who's, we've got runners.
Let's go with someone in the back for the next one.
I
you
will,
guys have a huge disadvantage because we can't
guys.
see any of you because of the lights.
Go ahead.
All right, so last week, obviously the big news at GDC was the Vive. And I know that you may or may not have had a chance to try it yet, but the big news from them obviously was a release date. So does Oculus feel pressured now that there is an HMD, consumer-grade HMD with a release date?
I would just say we feel our own pressure, right? We've been sort of determined to launch consumer VR and deliver the best VR headset for a really long time, right? You saw Gear VR we announced the release date for Gear VR consumer later this year. John did that at GDC. And with the Rift, our team just wants to launch this thing as soon as we possibly can, but with no compromises, right? And that's really been the key for us, is we want to make sure we're delivering the absolute best product at the right time. We're moving as fast as we can. We promise it'll be worth the wait.
It also doesn't add more pressure, mostly because there could not possibly be more pressure anyway.
I think he's right.
It's not. Competitors are always going to pop out. We like it when other people get involved. The more people there are making VR headsets, the more content there's going to be. The more game developers can be sure that they're going to make money making VR games, and that's going to help everybody. So people are always going to continually enter, but we're already under a lot of internal pressure. We just want to launch this thing. We want to get it out as quickly as we can.
Pressure from Paul down there. He wants us to launch.
I was going to say, as not an employee of Oculus, I'm allowed to give you guys credit for shipping the most VR headsets of all time already. So it's a pretty good position to be in.
Well, and also people like Paul, they got to make money. It's all about the money. And we're under pressure, not just there's this idea that there's external pressure from other people releasing headsets. That's not where the pressure comes from. The pressure comes from the people you've been working with for years that are saying, I want to release this game. I want people to play this thing. And that hasn't changed at all, except that they're more excited about being able to make money in VR.
Yeah, and I would just add to what Palmer said before and just re-emphasize that it is pretty awesome coming out of GDC, the additional number of developers who are like, I'm in, I'm quitting my job, I'm doing VR. HTC has shown up, Sony with Morpheus, Oculus, you guys are doing your thing. now that we have a lot of VR headsets out there, plus Gear VR, obviously, that really increases the addressable market for devs. And ultimately, with Gen 1 of the Rift, our goal is to make developers successful. Like, if we do that, there will be all this awesome content, all this awesome made for VR content that shows up. You know, rising tide lifts all boats. As long as VR takes off, I think Oculus is in a great position. And so we're super excited about that. And congrats to the HTC and Valve team and the Morpheus team on their announcements, because they were awesome. Let's take a question from the back. As per Palmer, there's a gentleman there that's being pointed to.
Is it a gentleman?
I think so. I'm sorry. I'm so blind.
Good afternoon. So last week at GDC, when Gabe Newell said that his headset had no motion sickness, I was a little bit skeptical, especially having a DK2 myself, and then finding out that it requires people to move around the room. Do you really feel like selling a headset that requires someone to have space, wouldn't that restrict the amount of people that would actually support a device like that?
I think there's two questions in there. One is about people getting sick in VR, and the other one is about people having a space. Am I correct?
He lost his microphone. Sure.
Yes?
Just go
All
ahead.
right, yes. All right. I do not think that anyone can truly say that nobody will get sick in a VR headset. It doesn't matter how good you make the hardware. It could flawlessly simulate reality. I'm talking about everything, even your vestibular, inputs. There are still things that will make people sick. Of course, we can't actually do all of our perfect vestibular inputs. Things like vection, moving through space and rotation are going to make people sick. One could say nobody gets sick in this VR headset under a very specific set of circumstances, like not allowing artificial locomotion, not allowing rotation, not allowing for spinning horizons. But developers are going to make games that don't adhere to those rules. And as long as you let developers make any kind of experiences, every VR headset will have people who are getting sick in it. It doesn't matter how good it is. That's true for ours. It's largely up to devs. How people feel in virtual reality experiences. As far as having a large space, I don't know. You'd have to guess on what people would be able to do. We're trying to design something for what we think most people are going to use virtual reality for, and we can support a pretty large volume. All our Crescent Bay demos have been standing and walking around a small room. I'm sure there will be people who do that. I'm probably going to be one of those people, and there will be experiences that support that. But I don't think that the majority of people are going to do that, at least at this phase in virtual reality. I could be wrong.
I was just going to add, I think you made the point already, which is that we're constantly trying to have one specification for developers. We're trying to make developers' lives easy and increase, what they call the total addressable market, which is like, how many people can I actually sell my game to because I know they have the system, the headset, the space, the input, etc. And that's something we've been focused on a lot, especially over these last couple months. Just working with developers on what they want to see, what they'd like the recommended specification to be, what they'd like in terms of input and things like that. That's been a long road. But that's something you're going to see us do more and more of. In fact, we're going to be announcing recommended specification pretty soon. So if you're saving money, keep saving. Day is coming. But nailing that and making sure developers can target the most people possible, that's what's going to make them successful. And it goes back to that theme of like, developers have to be successful in Gen 1 for VR to take off. And that's our mission, right? VR that changes the world. Good question. Good. I got another one standing up back there in the middle.
Hey, so in response to that, as a developer, I just want to give Oculus kudos for the focus that y'all have obviously given towards your white paper early on and just working with developers with different workshops that y'all are doing. So I think that's really cool. With all your competition still, it's obvious on how much focus you guys are doing into working with the developers to make the content successful. So keep it up and kudos.
Thank you. Cass, we should get that guy some money right there. Joke. Okay. There's someone right there.
I had a question about video footage. On the DK2, it seems like if you look at a computer and see 1080p, it doesn't quite translate as clearly. I was wondering if that's something you guys are focused on right now for like film and video.
it's pretty simple. You take pixels and you stretch them out over a much wider field of view. It's going to look bad. Something that looks good on a monitor that is only taking up a very small portion of your view is going to look a lot better than when you blow it up and make it 100+ degrees. It's something we're working on, and there's a lot of ways to do that, like trying to reduce screen door effect, increasing the actual physical resolution, working with anti-aliasing and super sampling to try to make existing content look better when you are limited to a particular resolution. But it's something we're working on, but there's no holy grail, and it's very unlikely that, whether it's 1080p, 4K, 8K, it's going to be a while before you have content in VR that is indistinguishable from the highest end displays that you can get as a TV or a monitor.
I had a couple more questions that I did want to hit from the community, so we'll come back to the audience. One really important one, will the Rift be an exclusive platform? Palmer, do you want to rock that?
No. It's always been that way. Anyone can play games from wherever they want to play them, whether it's buying it directly from the developer or getting a build sent to you by a friend or buying it as part of a Humble Bundle or GOG or Desura or Steam or anywhere else that you want to get content. And we have no plans of changing that. We think that people should have the ability to play whatever games they have and buy them from wherever they want and do whatever they want with them. And the Rift will let people do that.
Cool. Paul, one for you from Twitter was, our studio is interested in making virtual reality games, but it's been hard to focus on our entire team on a made-for-VR title. When's the right time to commit, and then how and why did you guys decide?
Well, I was telling people at GDC, we're a little bit different as a studio. It's part of our DNA. We kind of commit irresponsibly early to some things that we think are cool. So this is the same studio that made Words with Friends. One of the reasons that worked out is because, we saw the iPhone and we immediately jumped on it with a bunch of kind of high quality developers when at that time it was mostly kind of hobby efforts and such. All I would say is if you're still asking that question as a developer, please get your hands on the latest. Go see Crescent Bay. These guys are awesome. They'll hook you up. They'll find you where you are, and they will show it to you. And once you see it, I think you'll be able to answer that question for yourself. The time is now. In fact, it's maybe a little late. We've been working on it for a couple of years now. But now is a fantastic time to start. GDC that we just came from was, it wasn't GDC, it was VRDC, really. It's like, it was just, it took over the show. So, I could feel that excitement out there. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, go see it. Start making games for it.
Ryan, I got a quick one for you. Are you experimenting with different means of wireless data transmission?
Great, thank you. This is close to my heart. Is developing a lot of the cable technology that we have in our products today. So cutting the cable is something that would be really awesome, and it's along the lines of what we talked about before, where we are always investigating competing technologies, building demos, and wireless is hard because we are pushing the limits of video bandwidth and other things in order to preserve or produce that awesome experience, refresh rate and resolution. And so the cable needs to support more data, but yet we want to make it disappear. A lot of the wireless technologies used for HD video today are built based on some assumptions that don't work as well in VR. Like a lot of the technologies that we use, they may not have been designed for VR. Things like the supporting a standard set of timings or being optimized for that, or being based on fixed endpoints. So when you have someone's head moving, maybe that's not a great target for this technology. And probably most importantly, the compression and the latency in those systems kind of breaks our fundamental rule of the motion to photons. So yes, it's something we're actively investigating. We don't have anything to show right now, but it's a very good area to improve the user's VR experience.
I got one more easy one from the community. Palmer, what is your favorite brand of flip-flops?
This one was surprisingly high. I buy Olukai. I got the sweet tip from Freddie Wong. He said, Palmer, you're wearing flops. I got to hook you up with Olukai. And I said, are you being paid by Olukai? He says, of course not. And so I'm wearing Olukai flip-flops.
Are you being paid by Olukai?
I have nothing to announce at this time.
One I wanted to address. In general, it appears that Oculus has pivoted away from games and moved to cinematic side of VR, which is what this gentleman was talking about. Was this a conscious decision or something that's just happened organically? So our focus at Oculus, I think, has always been games. We founded the company with this vision of revolutionizing games, and that we really believed that VR would do that. And when you look at how we're investing our resources, the vast majority of our team is focused on building either game technology or services that enable all sorts of experiences, whether it's game focused or things like film or communication or anything like that. And so I think when you see us do things like Story Studio, which is roughly 10 people out of over 300 people at Oculus, the focus is more around investing in making our developers successful again, and in two ways. One is with Story Studio, we didn't know how filmmakers should approach telling stories in VR, and they were coming to us saying, I want to make a movie in VR. How do I do it? And we were like, we have no idea, we make games. Sorry. So by doing Story Studio and sharing all of that knowledge with filmmakers, we've actually seen this huge groundswell, and you'll see it here at South by Southwest, in filmmakers making awesome content for virtual reality. Why is that important? It's really important to have a diverse array of content, right? If you think back to like what we were talking about before, we need, content is going to be what moves hardware. And so by getting a diverse array of content, you're bringing more people into VR, right? Maybe I don't want to play, Call of Duty VR, but I really do want to see like a Pixar film in VR, right? So expanding that user base, having more different types of content, then increases the number of the size of the market that developers can target, which ends up making all developers more successful. So you're going to continue to see us make small investments in different areas, whether it's 360 movies or Story Studio, and it's really about getting more diverse content on the platform and helping you guys out there that aren't necessarily game makers get on the VR train and help us make this thing change the world.
And also,
go ahead.
I'd add that the Story Studio team is doing something right if with 2 or 3% of the resources of Oculus as a whole, they've managed to make enough noise at just a few film festivals that anyone would perceive it as being the new focus of Oculus. They're clearly doing a lot for their little allotment.
Yeah. So we've got time for, I think, one more question. I can't actually see anyone. There's this gentleman who's been sitting on the floor patiently right there. Make it a good one. We'll try to do one. What's our time? Can someone?
We got plenty of time, Nate.
One more. We have 1 minute.
One of the things that I find really exciting about virtual reality is its potential as an educational platform. For example, teaching your teenager how to drive by her going into a virtual experience, or an application where you go in there and a character based on Neo teaches you software development. Can you tell us a little bit about your vision in that area, or anything, initial activity that's going on, funding, things like that?
I think you pretty much nailed it. I mean, our vision is that VR does end up revolutionizing education. I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about. The reality is that education is an industry that doesn't have a lot of expertise in building real-time 3D worlds. And the money there is there's not a ton of investment, and there tends to be a little bit of bureaucracy. So it's not one of the easiest areas to crack. It's an incredibly hard problem. There are a couple teams who are digging in there and trying to make inroads. And again, I think it's one of the things like Palmer and I and Ryan that we talk most about. Like, imagine when our kids are throwing on Oculus Rifts and exploring the Coliseum, or like going to Jurassic Park within reason. That's going to be awesome. It's going to take some time to get there, and it is going to have to come probably from investment in the education industry. I think it's ripe for a great startup to tackle.
I can't wait for children to learn about the dinosaur breakout at Jurassic Park in a truly realistic way. Education does move really slowly too. Education is not. It's one thing to say, oh, we have a pilot program, or we have this one charter school we're doing something interesting with, but actually doing mass deployments of educational tools, it takes a really, really long time, and there's a lot of, like Nate said, bureaucracy and cost and regulation around it that really impede it every step of the way.
But we're determined to get it right eventually. All right, guys, I think that's all the time we have. I'm sorry. Thank you guys so much for coming. Really appreciate it. To the developers out there, thank you. Thanks, guys.